Why, hello, my loves, and welcome back to Spook Manor. Are you here for yet another goat of a tale? Well, I have quite the freak show for you. It is a story about four paranormal-seeking friends in high hopes of making a name for themselves in the world of the unexplained. But they are soon faced with real terror as they make their way through the darkness of their own misguided perceptions. Would you care to join us as we make our way down the railroad tracks to hell? Then let's begin. It is a warm summer evening in Kentucky where our story begins. Four friends are seated around a small kitchen table discussing the plans for their next adventure. Young, self-proclaimed ghost hunters and passionate legend trippers, they are in hot pursuit of their next mysterious escapade. Cody and Daniel, ages 18 and 19, were the money behind the operation, with full access to the bank of mom and dad. Jacob and Drew were their proud partners in crime. At the ages of 18 and 22, they had spent a reasonable amount of time earning their paranormal investigator's license online. Together, they are the perfect team. They have already made several videos of searching through abandoned structures in the city and small towns of the surrounding area, with little to no regard for the dangers of trespassing. They were looking for a thrill, and what better place to start than to visit the legendary Goatman, who resides in Fisherville, which is a neighborhood of Louisville, Kentucky. They sat there eating a large pizza and making plans to visit the monster at his known place of residence. The atmosphere was dark and dreary where Cody lived in his parents' basement. It was the typical bachelor pad one would expect from an 18-year-old pretending to be out on his own. The young man sat around in their dark, ghost hunter-inspired clothing and rebel chic hair, discussing the plans for their next move. Drew was the first to bring up the creature. Okay, tomorrow night we go in search of the monster, or Goatman, of Kentucky. The legend states that he lives at the top of the Trestle Bridge, which is for train tracks that go over Popelet Creek. They say the monster will jump down on top of cars and sometimes wields an axe. So Daniel, you'll be the one driving, Drew directed. What is the legend exactly? Cody asked, stuffing his face with his third piece of pizza. It is said that the Goatman was a prisoner of a traveling carnival freak show. Apparently, the train carrying the circus derailed at the bridge, and the monster escaped, inflicting his revenge on his captors and anyone else he meets, Drew replied ominously. I heard he was a farmer in the 1950s who made a deal with the devil to get magical powers. Powers to make his produce grow to record sizes for the rest of his life. The devil told him he had to sacrifice every single one of his goats in order to obtain these said powers. So he rounded up his goats and killed all of them. But you know Satan, he's a sneaky SOB. And despite giving him the magic they agreed on, the devil also changed the farmer into a part man, part goat, part sheep creature. Of course, that made it very difficult to sell his produce. The farmer was shunned from the town and was soon forced to hide out at the bridge, where he then took revenge against anyone who dared approach him, added Daniel. I heard he was a hybrid, the twisted offspring of a farmer and his goat, Jacob smarted off, and they all laughed. Drew quickly cut in. This is serious, he stated, again holding everyone's attention. Be warned though, guys. This Goatman has magical powers to control your mind and change his voice to trick you. So everyone needs to be on the top of their game, Drew added authoritatively. They finished pulling together their equipment and got a good night's rest for their adventure the following night. The next morning, the men were all jacked up on coffee and excitement. They got a certain rush from breaking the law and going to places they knew they were not allowed. Being adrenaline junkies that they are, they lightheartedly filmed themselves on their road trip to Fisherville. After a big lunch and getting a bit of footage around town, they finally made it to the bridge at dusk. Their playful attitude turned serious as Daniel slowed his vehicle to pass under it. They were all in high hopes the axe-bearing Goatman would strike their car from above. Of course, nothing happened, and they made several U-turns to drive under it again, still to no avail. The monster wasn't taking their bait. Disappointed, though not surprised, Daniel parked his car in a nearby, yet well-hidden location before they geared up and made their way to their desired location. There was a nice walking path that guided them, and though under the bridge was kept clear, woodland covered the surrounding area. As planned, when the sun went down and they were in total darkness, the men set up Cody's night vision camera. Making a circle, they called out to the goat man. It was a dramatic scene, with their little candles and hands held together in reverence. Drew, who always seemed to be making himself the star of the show, gave an exaggerated prayer as Cody spun one of the cameras around to show their intense faces. As much as they were paranormal hunters, they prided themselves on their acting skills as well. It was then that they decided to split up. Drew and Cody went one way with their spirit box, and Jacob and Daniel went the other way with their EMF gauge and digital audio recorder. They then went in opposite directions, walking right down the center of the trestles for about 30 minutes each way. They could hear a strange animal cry off in the distance, and that added to their spooky effect nicely, while also giving them the addicting shivers that paranormal hunters crave so much. Finally, Cody stopped and pulled out the spirit box. Drew stood with flashlight in one hand and camera in the other, recording Cody as he began to ask the box questions. They seemed to be making some progress. The box spouted words like goat, bridge, and unfair. It was then that Drew wanted to take the spirit box, and the two men argued for a bit. Cody was getting annoyed with Drew's incessant demand for attention, and Drew was determined to get his way. As they argued, the spirit box spouted, "I got them." And they both stopped to look at the box. Turning the camera back on, Cody asked, "Got who? Who did you get?" And the box blurted, "Friends." The men looked at each other with surprise. "You have our friends?" Drew asked from behind the camera. "Yes," the box bleeped again. With total amazement and the opportunity for a dramatic scene, they took off running through the trestles back towards their friends at the other end. When they finally got back to where they had started, Daniel and Jacob were still gone. They nervously called out to their friends with intensity to put on a show for their future audience. But they started getting concerned when their friends still didn't respond. After searching for nearly 15 minutes, Cody heard Jacob call out from the top of the bridge. They looked up to see what looked like him, dangling from one of the beams. Panic set in, and Cody turned to Drew. "What is he doing? We all agreed not to climb it because of all of those deaths related to the legend," Cody stated, clearly in a panic. "I'm going to fall. Help me, I can't hold on," Jacob called out again from above. Clearly outraged, and knowing Drew would be no help at all, Cody began to climb the bridge. It was a long and grueling climb, but something seemed to be possessing Cody. His focus was strictly on saving his friend, and no words could convince him otherwise. It was as though he was filled with an unnatural strength. On a normal day, he would never have been able to make that climb. He wasn't athletic in any way, shape, or form, but he was being driven by some unforeseen force. Drew watched from below, recording the whole ordeal and feeling like a fool. He knew he should be calling the police, yet feared being arrested for trespassing. But then he was struck with a realization. Where was Daniel? Drew tried to maneuver the flashlight, but no matter how hard he tried, or which direction he pointed the flashlight, he could not see Jacob, who was still calling out from the top of the bridge for help. Suddenly, Drew heard voices. Coming from his left, he saw two flashlights heading his way. They were coming from the same directions his friends had originally gone, and he cursed under his breath, fearing it might be the police or a gang. Quickly, he turned off his flashlight and made his way towards the edge of the woods to hide out. Cody was halfway up the bridge at this point and called out to Drew for help. With the light of Drew's flashlight now gone, Cody was stranded, hanging from the bridge in total darkness. It was then that Jacob and Daniel could be heard, and Drew realized that they were the ones approaching with the flashlights. Relieved, he stepped out from the trees. "Dude, I thought you were at the top of the bridge," Drew asked Jacob in disbelief, pointing upwards. "We agreed not to, man," Jacob responded with surprise. "Cody went up to save you. We heard you calling for help," Drew exclaimed with shock. He turned and hollered up to Cody. "Get down here, man! It's a trap! It must be the monster!" he called out. But it was too late. They were having trouble finding Cody on the bridge with their flashlights, and worse, they could now hear a train roaring down the highly active tracks. The men all called out to Cody frantically in hopes of finding him. The bridge rattled and shook fiercely from the massive train and its many heavy boxcars. There was no way anyone would have the strength to hold on to the trestle. It was then that they could hear Cody scream and managed to catch him with their lights as he fell hard to the ground from halfway up the bridge. The sound of the impact would haunt their dreams for years to come. But miraculously, Cody survived, though with horrible injuries that would take years to heal and that would cause him chronic pain for decades to come. Laying in the hospital bed, the friends all stood around their injured companion. When they asked what had happened, Cody explained in grave detail. "I thought I had found Jacob. I could hear him calling to me for help. I knew I was getting close. But then I saw him in the shadows, and he had the head of a goat. I panicked. Between the shock of what I saw and the shaking of the bridge, I just couldn't hold on." The footage from the night was poor at best. Daniel and Jacob had nothing to show for their adventure, and the trauma of what happened to Cody did not seem appropriate to share publicly. But there is a lesson learned in all of this. To heed the warnings of those less than fortunate souls who tragically lost their lives in search of a monster that turned out to be their own poor choices. This is a ghostly omen from those precious spirits, to honor their lives by refusing to trespass on their sacred memory, or you will suffer the inevitable consequences at the trestle bridge where the goat man awaits. So tell me, my loves, have you been to Popelet Creek, or do you plan a visit? Have you met the goat man and experienced his mind-altering tricks? Please comment down below and like and subscribe for more fictional stories that are often of actual urban legends and sometimes have historical reference. See you next week and have a good night.